away from the technicalities now. Good. Sorry about that. So first of all, thank you. I know that we are in the middle of World Cup cricket, so many of you would be sort of keen that this, we finish it. But at the same time, I'm thankful to all of you who have joined despite that. Uh, as you can see, this is dedicated to late Elaben, but I released this paper on the 2nd of November. It was her first, first anniversary of her passing away. And it was Elaben who had first used the word nurturance in a conversation with me. And while I was referring to Kumarappa's economy of permanence, I think while permanence does capture the sustainability dimension, I think nurturance captures the caring, sharing, collaboration, all of that. Some of the motherly qualities that Elaben was used to embody. So I am dedicating this to her. So let me begin with two recent, sort of, first the Confederation of Indian Industry had announced a few months back that India can become a $40 trillion economy by 2047 if the entire working population is employed. Thank God they at least had that in mind. And then a little later, the Niti Aayog is said that they're working on a draft vision document, which will be released by the Prime Minister in the next few months, where they are expecting the Indian economy to reach $30 trillion. Now, the interesting thing about both of these so-called visions is that they are falling exactly in the old paradigm where all progress is essentially captured in one single number, which is the GDP, the size of GDP, and therefore the growth rate of the GDP. I'm sure when the documents come, they'll have a few other dimensions, such as the Human Development Index and so forth. But I want to draw your attention to the fact that exactly in the year that we are in, which is the beginning of the Amrit Kal, the multidimensional poverty index released by the government of India showed that while there has been a lot of progress on reduction in poverty in India, we still have the world's largest number of poor people, 228 million, 22.8 crore persons, officially below a certain level of, I mean, and unlike the old poverty line, the multidimensional poverty index covers other dimensions, including health, education, access to many services, and so forth. Likewise, the National Family Health Survey 5th round, which was also released in early 23, showed that 36% of our children under age 5 were stunted, 19% were wasted, and 32% were undernourished. Now, by 2047, these children will be between 26 to 30 years old. Presumably, they will also be part of the same $30 or $40 trillion economy. But can we imagine what would be their situation as human beings if fully 1/5 of them today are called wasted and 32% are underweight, and 36% are stunted. Likewise, India is already the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. And if I shudder to think if our economy grows tenfold from the current roughly $3 trillion to $30 trillion, how much greenhouse gases we will be doing. So while, we need to, of course, aim for a higher per capita income and therefore a higher GDP, there's no doubt about that. But we need to learn our lessons and start talking in terms of, you know, a different kind of building a different kind of economy. And this paper is partly written as a rejoinder to these two vision documents, both of which I have not yet seen in detail, uh, and saying that let us look at other dimensions of the economy rather than just the GDP. As Anant referred in his introduction, we are facing this triad of crises, I call them, the social, economic, and the ecological ones. You're all familiar with it, so I'm not going to spend too much time detailing out the fairly alarming levels of the breakdown of the social contract, the growing economic inequality with poverty amidst plenty, and fast deteriorating environment. You know, our capital city has had an air quality index of 500 and above for the last 10 days. Uh, with all these, you know, we don't seem to be going on the right track. And according to me, the fundamental cause of all these is the present economic system, because it's designed to maximize return on financial capital invested in any economic transaction. And I'm thankful to Anant for pointing to the fact that I'm using the language of capital in my presentation, because in some ways my presentation is aimed at economists and their overdue influence on the policy making, particularly the growth policy making of the nation. And therefore, I have tried to use the language of capital. But Anant, just as I think reducing everything to the world of capital is, amounts to minimizing. For example, to call society social capital, as we said, Putnam has tried to do, is not appropriate. Similarly, actually, the other forms of capital, so-called natural capital, human capital, social capital, have all actually become financialized. You know, so the predominant form of capital today is financial capital, and my critique is largely about financial capital, and I use the other four essentially just to have a quick dialogue with the economists who are overly influential in the world of policy. So, I mean, so very quickly to go back to Karl Marx, who talked about the labor theory of value, and he made it clear that all wealth and well-being is actually sourced from nature, and but a diamond lying below the earth is of no use. It requires human labor and skill for it to be, excavated from the earth and then polished before it becomes valuable. So that's the labor theory of value. And the fact that there are different types of resources or capital, and I am aware that I'm now falling in the language trap that Ananta mentioned. But for the moment, let me persist with this, that there is natural, human, physical, and social, and physical, and financial capital. And the interrelationship between them works out as follows. Human capital organized using social capital acts on natural capital to produce physical capital. And that generates surpluses, which are then preserved in the form of financial capital and which is then reinvested. So one of the conveniences of financial capital is that it's a store of value, and it can be used for inter-period transition of wealth, and it's a medium of exchange, so it enables quick transactions. But in the process, it alienates people from the real sources of both wealth and well-being. And it's reached a point in the late 20th century where financial capital has become a force by itself, and which multiplies by itself and accumulates by itself. And while its owners keep changing, depending on exigencies, but it seems to have acquired a life of its own. And I think it's a devil that we need to learn to control. And the reason behind this is that one of the axioms of economics is that capital is invested, and the tendency of any rational economic actor is to maximize the return on that investment. And if this is, as per Adam Smith, invisible hand, this was good because through that process, resources would get deployed efficiently and it would enhance the welfare of all. But as we know, in today's world, financial capital got concentrated in the hands of relatively few individuals. I'm told there was a study which showed that in 2022, fully 82% of incremental financial wealth went to the top 1% of the population. So that's the level of concentration that has happened. And therefore, we cannot rely on this axiomatic view that maximizing return on investment by financial actors will lead to welfare of all. In fact, the evidence is quite the contrary. And therefore, control over financial capital and its deployment for maximizing social welfare, while paying attention to the most vulnerable members of society, what's called the Antyodaya principle, and also ensuring that the environment is conserved. This has become the key challenge of our times. So, Ananta, I want you to, focus on this one point. The reason my entire paper is so driven by the use of the word capital is because I think this is the central malady of our time. That financial capital is not being deployed for the two most important purposes: maximizing human welfare and conserving the environment. And in fact, it's doing quite the opposite. So we have to do something about it. Now, as a result of this maximizing behavior, we find that there's a tendency to extract a surplus from the other forms of capital. Exploit human labor, exploit the community and its institutions, and of course exploit land, water, energy, minerals, etc., even to the point of exploiting physical capital to a point where their ability to remain productive gets impaired. So the difference between utilization and exploitation, according to me, is that in both cases, some surplus accrues to whoever is controlling these. But if you extract so much surplus that the ability of these factors of production to remain productive, and in case of human beings to reproduce themselves and to invest in their own development and growth, is taken away, then that is exploitation. So we can clearly distinguished between participation in an economy, utilization of resources in an economy, and exploitation of resources in an economy. And we've reached a point where, because of the need to maximize return on financial capital, exploitation has become the norm rather than the exception. And due to this, the present economic system is actually creating poverty and unemployment. It's actually eroding social capital, and it's actually harming the environment. These are not side effects or unintended consequences of the present economic system. I think we need to clearly confront this reality that because the present economic system is driven by the need to maximize the return on financial investment, which itself belongs to relatively few people in the world. So, in the quest to get that maximum return, they are actually doing things which create poverty, unemployment, erode social capital, and harm the environment, and therefore harm the welfare of most of us. And therefore, the present economic system has failed. I think we should just clearly be able to say that to every person, every capitalist, every economist, every policy analyst who, holds the economic system as essentially a force for the good, and with some minor corrections can actually help us achieve greater welfare for all. It's completely not true, and the sooner we say this rigorously, the better it is. And therefore, we have to move to a different economic paradigm, from exploitation and non-sustainable growth to inclusive growth and sustainable well-being. In fact, economic growth by itself is of no consequence if it leads to reduction in human well-being. So, that kind of an economy is what I'm calling an economy of nurturance. And an economy of nurturance, therefore, is one where human beings are valued, not just as producers or as consumers, but as the very basis for which, in fact, the economy is designed to serve human beings and not the other way around. So today's economy seems to treat human beings as basically either workers, all levels, or as consumers. There doesn't seem to be any further purpose for human beings in economic thinking. They are just instruments for either the demand side as consumers or supply side as producers. And that has to fundamentally change. Secondly, trust, caring, collaboration are central to this economy. And thirdly, the environment itself is cared for, and we try to sort of move our consumption habits to a level where we minimize waste. We try to reduce our consumption, reuse what we can, and recycle what we can. And so, in a sense, we move from today's linear economy to a much more circular economy, as the predominant way of production and consumption. And of course, there are other elements such as what, again, Ananta referred to the 100-mile economy. Ella Ben had written a book called Anubandh, which talks about, the density of human relations in that economy. And so that idea is built into those SEER districts, these socio-economic and ecological regeneration districts that I talked about later. So the question is, okay, we don't mind having an economy of nurturance, but how do we go about it from where we are today? And that's where the second half of my paper is actually quite, it's not conceptual. It deals with contemporary reality and deals with how to do it. And the four big points are: first is we have to regenerate our Jal, Jangal, Zameen, Jeev Jantu, and Jal Vayu. Our the very basis of our existence. And Jeev Jantu is a way of addressing biodiversity. Jal, Jangal, Zameen, of course, is water, forest, and land, and Jal Vayu is the broader environment. Uh, uh, we need to significantly invest in human capital. I mean, the data I gave at the beginning about malnutrition, uh, it needs to be seriously addressed, and almost immediately, before those 5-year-old children become 10 years old, and before those who are only 1 year old become 6 years old, we need to ensure that their nutritional deficits are a thing of the past. And we have the resources, we have the institutional capability, we have the technology. What we lack is a societal and therefore a political will. Likewise, investments in health and education. I mean, it's off the period that we need to spend 9% of our GDP on these two. But one of the points I want to mention is that even as recently as the last round of the periodic labor force survey, we see that only 3.2% of our workers have received any form of formal skill training. Roughly another 17% received informal training. So about 20% of our workers received some training, but formal is as low as 3.2%, and that's incredibly low. If you want to invest in making our fellow human beings capable of earning a living, then they need an investment in not just their health and education, but also their skilling. Likewise, we need to reinvest in a new generation of social capital, all the way from neighborhood self-help groups to cooperatives to civil society, NGOs, to panchayat, to municipal bodies, to cultural societies. A lot of these have actually, while they have come up in form, they have not come up in spirit, and we need to invest in those. And when I say invest, I don't mean only capital, financial capital investment. What I mean is that around that financial capital investment, there will be human beings who will do real work around them to make these real. And finally, the point that I earlier alluded to, that all this will have to be done all over the country, and which means that spatially, we need a polycentric approach. And since we're a relatively large country, a subcontinent-sized country, if we think in terms of about 1,400 districts with roughly, 10 lakh population in each, that's the kind of number I'm talking of. And these can be these district boundaries can be drawn up to take into account socio-economic as well as ecological considerations. And all these three aspects would require regeneration. And that's why I call them socio-economic, ecological regeneration districts, where the goal would be to ensure jobs for all and high HDI simultaneously through the above three. So how do we get there? And so the third part of the paper is basically, in some ways, saying that I don't want to do this as just a conceptual exercise and then leave it back to the economists to detail it out. And therefore, it's to be done in three phases. The first step is to first get full employment for everybody, which means that we need to generate about 6 crore new jobs in the next 5 years. There's a fairly detailed section of how that can be done, which sectors and what kind of investment would be needed. There's a second phase where the emphasis is not so much on additional jobs, but on the roughly 50 crore existing workers out of the roughly 54 crore who are there today, who do not have adequate wage earning, incomes, or job security or dignity of work, because a lot of them are just casual employees, or they are self-employed workers. In fact, one astounding statistic that many of you may not have be fully aware of is that the employment data that the government of India puts in, quite at variance with the international norm of how employment is measured. In India, the PLFS data, the Periodic Labor Force Survey data, includes workers in own account enterprises, that is the family enterprises, who are not paid at all. So, for example, there's a weaver and he's a male, and his wife is assisting him in, maybe setting the yarn on the loom, or winding the ferns for the shuttle and various other tasks. But she earns no cash income out of this. Now, as per the global standards, ILO standards, what she does will be called work beyond household duty, but it would not be called employment because she's not earning anything. But the government of India, since 2016, took the decision that this is to be treated as employment. And as a result, our so-called employment statistics are highly exaggerated, which means our unemployment is understated. To be precise, out of our total population of workers, 58% are self-employed, and out of that 58%, 18% are unpaid workers. So fully 18% of our workforce is actually officially gets no wage. So starting from that level to where the average wage level for casual workers is about 9,000 rupees per month, where for the self-employed it's about 12,000 rupees per month, and for those with regular wages it's about 20,000 rupees per month. This is again PLFS data. So we have all these three levels are completely not acceptable, and we need a 10-year window during which time we can fix this. So I am also for growth of the GDP, but growth of the GDP has to start from the bottom by increasing the wages and incomes of those who are working for us. Thereafter, from 2035 to 2047, we would still need to make deep structural changes to transform the economy from exploitation to nurturance. We'll need to build new forms of institutions, identify obstacles and gaps, and invest in solutions to overcome these. That's a much longer process, and I've spent less effort in that. But for the first two steps, very quickly, as you can see, just to put some real numbers, we need for these 7 main steps that I'm talking about: regeneration of natural resources, agricultural diversification, infrastructure in district and small towns, the CR districts, education and skill development, nutrition, healthcare and human services, employment-linked incentives as against production-linked incentives, and repair, recycling, and renewable energy enterprises. If we have to do these systematically, we have to invest in them, and the total investment I've estimated is 300 lakh crores, 300 trillion rupees over a 10-year period. And this is, by the way, comparable to India's GDP this year. So, but since I'm talking about 10-year period, it comes to 30 lakhs, and that's about a little less than the projected GDP, less than 8% of the projected GDP in 2024 in nominal terms. And by the time we get to 2034, it will be as low as 4% of the GDP. Now, the interesting thing is that all of this does not have to be done by the government. In fact, investments in agricultural diversification and in micro, small, and medium enterprises, they all have to be made by private individuals. And they in turn can be financed by banks. India's wealth is actually India's people's savings lying in our banking system. And, there is no need for us to keep making demands on an already strained government fiscal budget to do more. Certainly, when it comes to investment in regeneration of natural resources, because they are in the nature of public goods, infrastructure, education, and health, the state will have to play a major role. But there, I think, it will come down to as little as initially 4% and later 2% of the GDP, and it's highly, highly feasible. So, I don't want to sort of go into the technicality of this, but we can build very simple macroeconomic models to show that this is feasible. However, it requires is more than that. We recognize that the economy of nurturance will not happen automatically. It will be resisted by those who benefit from the present exploitative economy. And therefore, we have to do this in 3 steps. And that's where I'm really thankful to Anant Bhai and all of you for attending this, because we all have to collectively work at the level of change in value systems, ideologies, and knowledge systems, because those are the very foundations of everything else that will follow. But we also have to do beyond ideological work. We have to do what is classic political mobilization work, and that means working with leaders of various occupational groups and working with elected representatives and political parties. So, but let me, since most of you are scholars, let me give examples of at least 2 disciplines, the discipline of economics and the discipline of financial accounting, which are so deeply flawed right now, and yet they occupy extreme power positions in the applied knowledge hierarchy because of their partnership with the world of capital, that they don't even acknowledge the damage they are doing to society and indeed to our politics now due to their wrong so-called axiomatic assumptions. And therefore, they need to be pressurized to examine their disciplines and correct the flaws and fully account for what I call lies and what economists call externalities, both social and environmental. Many enterprises are profitable because they do not account for all costs, such as pollution or exploitation of workers or overtaking community rights, because these happen outside the enterprise's P&L account, and so they are apparently profitable, but this is private profit, it's social loss. And we need to correct these 2 disciplines so that enterprises are both aware of what they're actually doing for society, and then society holds them accountable. On the other hand, there's a lot which is of real value, but economics does not value it. simple example is the contribution of women to home building and to reproductive functions. But almost any intra-family work, whether done by women or men or elder or children, is not valued and is therefore not counted in our economic aggregates. And therefore, we have a completely distorted picture of the economy. Similarly, a lot of what goes on in the informal economy, because it's hard to measure, it's not measured. And so what we call today the economic aggregates are basically the macroeconomic aggregates are seriously biased in favor of the formal economy. And as a result, all decisions of the economy, resource allocative decisions, are seriously biased in favor of the upper end of the economy, And it's time that this is corrected, because it's just wreaked havoc. Likewise, environmental services provided by natural resources, such as clean air or biodiversity, are far more valuable than material or energy uses of these same resources. I mean, you can cut a tree and sell it for 80,000 rupees or 1 lakh for its timber. But the same tree, if it's seen as an oxygen pump and as a carbon dioxide sequestration pump, its lifetime value is probably, 20 times that 80,000. But because today's economics does not in any way account for that, nor does today's financial accounting. So we think it's smart to cut a tree which is worth actually to society and the environment, it's worth, let us say, 20 lakhs, to cut it for 80,000 and sell it. And this is completely the fault of economists and financial accountants for persisting with falsehoods, as rigorous disciplines. And it's time we held them to task and made them correct. There has been some progress in the environmental laws penalizing pollution, and therefore, the innovations called carbon credits and so forth. We need similar laws to penalize exploitation of workers and indeed breakdown of social capital, and so that true social costs get accounted for. So, apart from this knowledge systems work, we would have to work with various occupational groups. I've listed some of them: farmers, women members of SHGs, artisan members of guilds, informal sector workers unions, construction workers, trade unions, and students, writers, intellectuals, cultural activists, people like all of you. If some of them are not organized, we will have to reach them through NGOs and other organizations who work with them. But we have to draw their attention to the destructive nature of today's economy and our alternative for pro-poor, pro-employment, pro-women, and pro-nature economy of nurture. And last, because of the importance of politics and political will in bringing about this level of change, we'll have to work with the whole range of political leaders, across party lines, to make them aware of the destructive nature of the present economic system, and to talk to them about the alternative economy of nurturance and its feasibility, so that the whole thing is adopted as a collective goal for transformation rather than a matter of political competition. So with that, I finish my presentation, and I request Randhir.
Thank you so much, Vijay Bhai. It is very enriching. In fact, your elaboration in the presentation, it enriches so much the paper that you have written. There is always the beauty of, the kind of the conversational elaboration and the writing of the text. So it really helps us that it is really feasible, it is doable. We can really, mobilize our aspirations and energy around the step-by-step process. Thank you, Vijay Bhai. And now, Randhir, I request you to coordinate the discussion, please, and questions, comments, and conversations.
Thank you so much, Ananta bhai. It was really a very, very insightful presentation. And I have already gone through the article, but the kind of deliberation sir has given, it was really inviting us to also revisit our whole understanding of planning. So I request respected participant to share their reflections on this very deep presentation. So I invite Somnath ji, and then we'll invite Professor Gyan Bloy also. So Somnath ji, over to you.
Okay. First of all, I had read Vijay's article twice over. That's the first point. The second, I found that it was so good and so innovative that I posted it to as many people that I wanted, that I could. And the third thing is that I find that the total number of participants is only 9, including, Vijay and the
No,
organizers.
there are the program is a Facebook Live, so there are participants who are also watching this program.
Okay, good. And the third point I made was that when Vijay talks about that many of the lies that the economists, have been propagating. Recently, I had gone through an interview by Angus Deaton, where he laments about the Chicago school that they have been the prime, what you might call, perpetrators of the talk that Vijay has been talking about, and he has, sort of quote unquote nailed the lie and asked for and pleaded for a more inclusive way of looking at economics, which looks at the social aspect. To that extent, I find a connect. But more important, I think that this particular article which I went through and also the presentation, I find it, while I am not a numbers person, but I do find that it's a perfectly doable one. And knowing Vijay, the way the rigorous amount of detailing that he does, he wouldn't be putting in any figures which are not implementable. So to that extent, I think that it is an extremely valuable document. But the last point which I would like to make is, at this point, that this sort of, his paper and the discussion that he's generating needs to go to a much wider audience. The political aspect, the political part is extremely important. While the civil society can do its own work, and for example, the large number of self-help groups and NPOs, they are doing their work, and some of the NGOs, but nonetheless, it needs a far more participation by the larger population, which includes, of course, the political parties. And therein lies the catch, because almost all political parties tend to benefit a lot from the what you might call existing system in terms of the money they tend to generate, and if you were to look at just the people who are at the helm of who have been contesting the elections, you will find all of them without exception, they are so moneyed, and the money that they have made is primarily through what he talks about is that 10% people. So to that extent, their own self-interests go, directly in conflict with what is being, talked about by Vijay. So that, I think, is a very major challenge that one has to face. So the need to have create a pressure group on reorienting, and Vijay did not specify so much as he did in the paper that it needs an ideological shift. So to that extent, the work is virtually cut out. And in presentation, he didn't talk about the role of the elites, which he has been talked about, which he has talked elsewhere. Of course, borrowing from sociologist Dipankar Gupta's book on the citizen elite. I think the role of the citizen elite in taking up this, the basic idea that Vijay has propagated, is extremely important. And to that extent, the engagement of his article, the engagement of his talk has to reach a much wider one. And I think the uh, posting it on the Facebook, of course, is very welcome, and I'm sure it is going to reach a wider audience. But the task of the people who are at the helm, or some of the key people, that is certainly, it cannot be underplayed. So that's where I will rest my case for the time being.
Thank you so much, Somnath Ji. I request Shri Vijay Mahajan ji to note down these confusion and comments, and I will invite you at the end of the session. May I invite Professor Gyan Glui, who is a deep thinker, and he's also associate of Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Listening. He's the economist from Italy. Yes, Professor Gyan, over to you.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting, and I could take many notices. There were, of course, very many points which are appropriate for questions. And what I'm curious in is rather a comparison with some worries which are always discussed in Europe. Because in Europe there is always this discussion of on inflation and on the point that inflation must be held under control, even though this means that there are no investitions, there is a lack of development in economy. And I have the impression that your project goes in the opposite direction to the economic policy of Europe, of the European Union, because you foresee a huge project of investment and of production of work. That is, the problem is in Europe, and also Amartya Sen, for instance, as polemized also 20 years ago, even 20 years ago, that Europe was on the wrong road because Europe was only worried with inflation, and these had disadvantages for the production of jobs, whereas economy should first of all produce jobs, and jobs also of a certain quality, of course, not only simple jobs or rather low-level jobs. And this implies also huge programs in the education and infrastructure and so on and so forth. That is, the first preoccupation, the first worry should not be not at all costs inflation, a control on inflation, as the European Union does since 30 years, but rather the production of an economy for the human beings. That is, human beings should be at the center, not inflation. And therefore, I have the impression that you prosecute some ideas with success, of course, which Sen has mentioned, for instance, or also Mahbubullah, the Pakistani economist, at the end of his life had mentioned too. But I thank you very much. It is really very interesting. I could take very many notices. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gyan, for very insightful comment. I invite Miniti Pradhanji, and there are, yes.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I would first like to thank Professor Vijay Mahajan for very enriching presentation. It was indeed, as Somnath sir said, to reach the wider audience. I don't have such questions about these things. I have just one thing I would just request him to elaborate little bit on Anubandh, the new co-creation, how it will be. Talk to little more, few points more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miniti Pradhanji. There are two questions in the chat books of Facebook. So there's a person, Sudhita Ghosh. She is asking that what are the constraints of decentralization of economy? Then the next question by Amit Srivastava. He's asking that why India is following Western economic model of development. Is it can we free from the WTO and all international commitments. Then another question is Supriya Ghosh. She's asking about that the world is divided into the first world capital and third world labor. What would be the possibility of equality in terms of labor and capital in world economic system? Yes. So I invite Shri Vijay Mahajan ji to share his comment and reflections on these queries.
Okay. Unless Kedarji wants to say something. Yes,
Kedarnath Sharma ji, I think his mic is not connected.
Oh, okay.
I request him to write his comment in the chat box.
Okay.
In the meantime, before Vijay goes into explaining, I would like to add, since I happen to be an industrial relations student, actually the 4 labor course that we had, it is quite pathetic. For example, everything is geared towards either casualization, the focus on safety and some focus on, good wages is simply not there. So actually we have got a huge amount of work cut out for us. And unfortunately, the labor movement has not been up to the mark, primarily because the labor movement has virtually withered away, and some of the unions that we have, some of them individually, they have tried to mount some, what you might call protest, but that has not added too much. So the amount of work that is there, and considering that the labor, which I talked about the labor, and of course, there's a separate work that he has done on the migrant workers also. So the situation in hand is extremely difficult. So the first phase that he talks about, I think that some amount of refocus we need to do on the labor course, and of course that's a done and dusted almost. But nonetheless, a concerted attempt needs to be done to address the issues that arise out of the implementation of the 4 labor codes. Okay. Over to Vijay.
Right. So first of all, thank you everybody, including people on Facebook, for your questions. Professor Ghosh, I keep discussing many drafts of my paper, so I'll deal with your questions last. Let me first go to the central point made by Professor Gianluigi about the European policymakers, fear of triggering inflationary pressures if there is too much public spending, which is what appears to be one of my thrusts. Now, I agree with the concern, but I am also deeply aware of that in India, as you know, we already have our inflation is not in a good position. Depending on how you measure it, it's anywhere between 5 to 9%, which is too high, and it should be brought down. And there have been attempts to tighten the monetary policy for that. But despite that, because of expansion of credit, in pursuit of growth, that is not happening. So we have to be careful. But the answer to what I'm saying lies in the fact that I am talking of not expenditure, but investment. And investments which will show results in terms of output, enhanced outputs, literally within 2 or 3 years of the investment being made. The largest set of investments I'm talking about are in natural resource regeneration. And I myself worked on thousands of small projects where relatively small investments in building a farm pond or, deepening a dug well or regenerating a defunct bore well or recharging groundwater or, regreening a degraded pasture or planting trees in a thinned out forest. Any of these within 18 months to 36 months of the initial investment being made, they make a difference to the microclimate and to the productivity. In case of farm ponds, of course, it makes a difference within 3 months. I just came back from Eastern UP and was delighted to see that people whose crops used to regularly fail due to monsoon failure, because they had just filtered farm pond, they were able to not only protect their kharif crop, but they were also able to plan a rabi crop, and in the meantime also plan for some fishery in the same pond. So in just one small intervention, their income has tripled, and the return on investment of that farm pond is over 100% if you take into account the social return. So it's by the micro choices that I'm saying that these investments or these public expenditures will not be inflationary. They will make a huge difference to not the short-term demand side, which causes inflation, but to the medium-term supply side situation. And it would make a difference to the local economy. And this also feeds into Minati's question about Anubandh. Anubandh is a title of a book that Elaben had written to refer to the 100-mile economy. Anubandh actually means a relationship or in the form of a bond, like a social bond. So what she is referring to, that it's not, the localness is not just geographical, it is because we are doing it as a community. And if you look at the the monthly per capita consumption expenditure data, which unfortunately it stopped after 2011-12. But till then, if you looked at it for any district, I've done detailed analysis for many districts, and I find that anywhere between 70 to 80% of what is consumed in a district is producible in the district. And therefore, investment in enhancing the productive capacity of the district leads to supply side enhancements and simultaneously increases income. So you get into a positive cycle. And this also links with the question about what are the constraints for decentralizing the economy in today's time. So the constraints are largely ideological, and because of that ideological thinking, the whole of policy making has become in favor of central production, large-scale production, export-oriented production. In the world of post-WTO, we are constantly worried about enhancing our exports and reducing our imports. And whatever we are importing is actually destroying our micro, small industries and so forth. So as a result, we have prematurely signed up into becoming a global economy without strengthening our local economy. And it's time that we, if necessary, if we were to take a holiday from WTO obligations for a decade, till we strengthen our local economy and join. And this is the difference between China and India. China joined WTO after fully, 25 years of internal reform, and in 3 steps. First, they strengthened the agriculture, then this moved from, agriculture to what are called township and village enterprises. And then from there, they moved to their special economic zones. And once the SEZs were fully, world competitive in terms of costs because of lower labor costs, they then signed up on WTO and flooded the world with goods. Whereas India did the same thing. We signed the WTO earlier than China, and we were not ready in terms of our competitive capabilities. And as a result, we got flooded in by, cheap goods and services. So I think as a, strategic decision, we need to think local and act local rather than think global and act global, which is what has happened in the previous 15, 20 years. The question about the capital labor dichotomy in the world, that capital belongs largely to the north and labor belongs largely to the south. That is quite true, Supriya, but it's reached a point now where this is a bit like what's called a GLOF, a glacial lake overflow flood. What happened in Sikkim a month ago. That the lake keeps flowing and filling and filling, and one day it just overflows and it causes a flood. Right now, the maldistribution of labor in the world is such that these artificial boundaries on movement of labor across nation-state boundaries, will sooner or later have to give way. Already you can see the immigrant pressure in Europe. Already you can see immigrant pressure within South Asia. You can the phenomena of diaspora all around the world. So I think a day will come when labor and capital will both become much more mobile across national boundaries. Just as if you remember, capital was not mobile across national boundaries till about 25 years ago. It's only a phenomenon of less than 3 decades. In the meantime, please remember that there's something called the global north, which is often geographically in the south. The Indian elite are part of the global north, and they are capital surplus, but they are residents of India, they're citizens of India, and their capital surpluses they can deploy in the Indian economy without it being seen as an FDI and all of that. And what is necessary is for the government to change the artificial pricing of capital and labor. Stop subsidizing capital, and in such a way so that it becomes clear to an entrepreneur what is the true cost of capital. And then automatically entrepreneurs will themselves make better choices in favor of more appropriate capital labor ratios in their choice of technology, so more appropriate for the Indian resource endowment. I mean, I'm stunned that Indian industry wants to adopt levels of automation and artificial intelligence, which is appropriate for, say, much for an economy like Japan or the US, where there's a serious shortage of labor. If we want our comparative advantage to really emerge, we should be champions in producing goods where labor is a significant part of the production cost, 40 to 50%, and we will beat the hell out of the world. In fact, we can now do it to even China, because the wage rates there have gone up. The New transformation happened in China. There is no surplus rural labor in China for the last several years. Their age profile is changing. So this is the time actually for us to bring a lot of that lower end production to make in India and export to the world. So, I mean, a lot of this is a matter of detail, but the biggest point is what, Professor Somnath was mentioning, that the first battle is ideological and political. We, the Indian elite, the Indian policymakers, including the fact, somebody asked the question, why India is following Western models. Partly because most of our top economists have basically studied in the top Western universities. Whether it's Cambridge UK or Cambridge US, but those are the kind of places where our top. The 2 Indian Nobel laureates are both sitting right now in Cambridge, US, and one of them was actually the dean of the other Cambridge University. So, despite their critique of some of Western ways of thinking, they are not able to give us, a significant systemic alternative of the kind that is necessary, and that would have to come from indigenous thinking. In some ways, Gandhiji tried to do that in his Hind Swaraj, but that was more of in the first place, Hind Swaraj is a personal document. It's a statement of how an individual who's seeking his personal, meaning of life, how he wants society to be organized. It's not, it's nowhere close to being a blueprint for how a society or an economy should be organized, except at the level of very broad principles. And therefore, we needed people like Kumarappa, who translated some of the philosophies of Hind Swaraj into the next level. And then we need today people who take the work, unfinished work of Gandhi and Kumarappa, and confront the dysfunctionalities of today's economy and say, hey, we have a holistic alternative which we can demonstrate on paper through rigorous modeling is both feasible and will lead to much better outcomes. And therefore, we need all of you to support it. And once that ideological and knowledge work has been done, then we need to do the political work with trade unions, with the political parties, and mobilize mass support behind it. So this is not something that's going to be done very easily or in a short time frame. So I'll stop there. And I realize that we're already sort of 1 hour and 15 minutes above. So
thank you so much, sir. It was really very insightful and very important session for our Swadesha Chakra circle. Now I request Miniti Pradhanji to offer a vote of thanks.
Thank you. I, Minati Pradhan, on behalf of Shraddha Chakra and Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, would like to thank our today's chief speaker, Professor Vijay Mahajan, for his very insightful presentation and answering all our queries in detail. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank Mr. Somnath Ghosh for his very valuable inputs. Thank you, sir, for being present with us and for your opinion. I also would like to thank Professor Gyanluiji, Mr. Kedar Sharma, the students like Amit Srivastav. Pardon me if I'm forgetting somebody's name, but I can see Sonu Kumar also. Thank you so much. You are being present with us and learning. Please pardon me if I'm forgetting anybody's name, but I really thank all of you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.